Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty cool story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. So get cozy, enjoy it, and watch it till the end, guys.
In the grim darkness of the far future, there are moments that define the nature of war itself. Moments when a single warrior, entombed in adamantium and ceramite, stands against an ocean of green-skinned fury. Tonight we explore one such moment. We delve into the metal heart of a space marine dreadnought and witness what happens when this walking fortress faces not just a skirmish, not just a warband, but an entire orc army. This is a story of endurance, of firepower, of the terrible mathematics of war, and of the indomitable spirit that refuses to yield even when the odds transform into an impossibility. The walking tom. To understand what transpires when a dreadnought faces an orc horde, we must first understand what a dreadnought truly is. It is not merely a weapon, though it carries enough firepower to level city blocks. It is not simply a vehicle, though its armored shell can withstand punishment that would vaporize battle tanks. A dreadnought is a paradox wrapped in metal. It is a tomb that walks, a warrior who should have died, given a second life within a shell of blessed machinery. The process of entombment begins with catastrophic injury. A space marine, already far beyond human in strength and resilience, suffers wounds so grievous that even their enhanced biology cannot save them. Perhaps their spine has been shattered by the power claw of a chaos champion. Perhaps an explosion has torn away limbs and organs beyond the skill of even the most talented apothecary to repair. In any other circumstance, such a warrior would be granted the Emperor's peace, their gene seed harvested for the next generation, their name added to the rolls of honored dead. But some warriors are too valuable to lose. Veterans who have fought for centuries, chapter masters who hold irreplaceable tactical knowledge, champions whose mere presence inspires entire companies. For these rare few, the Tech Marines offer a different path. The Dreadnought sarcophagus, an ancient technology that dates back to the Age of Strife, allows a dying warrior to continue serving the Emperor. Their ruined body, what little remains of it, is sealed within an amniotic tank at the heart of the machine. Neural interfaces connect directly to their brain, allowing them to control the dreadnought as if it were their own body. The transition is not gentle. Imagine waking to discover your hands are assault cannons, your legs are pistons of ceramite and adamantium, standing over twice the height of a man. Imagine seeing the world through optical sensors that render everything in targeting data and thermal signatures. Imagine speaking, only to hear your voice emerge as a mechanical rasp from Vox speakers. The human mind was not designed for this. The strain of the neural interface causes immense psychological stress, confusion, dyschronometria where time becomes fluid and unreliable, even senility in the very ancient. This is why dreadnoughts sleep. Between battles, they are returned to the fortress monastery, to sacred chambers deep within the chapter's stronghold. There, sealed in stasis fields, they rest, not the natural sleep of living beings, but a kind of death, sleep where consciousness fades, and the centuries pass like moments. Only when the chapter faces dire need are they awakened. Only when their wisdom is required or their firepower deemed essential do the Tech Marines bring them back to consciousness. When a dreadnought wakes, it wakes to war. The warrior within is not the same person who fell in battle. Centuries may have passed. The chapter they knew may have changed beyond recognition. Battle brothers they fought beside are long dead, their names carved in halls of remembrance. The galaxy itself may have shifted. New enemies may have risen, old ones evolved. Yet the dreadnought remembers. Fragments of their former life echo in the organic portions of their mind. They remember what it felt like to grip a bolter, to charge into battle with brothers at their side, to feel the weight of power armor rather than be the power armor. And they remember duty. This duty drives them when they are deployed. This purpose sustains them through battles that would break lesser warriors. A dreadnought is not just heavily armed and armored. It is piloted by a hero who has already died once and refused to stop fighting. When such a warrior faces an orc army, they bring not just weapons and armor, but centuries of combat experience, tactical acumen honed across countless battlefields, and a will that has already proven it cannot be broken by mere death. The dreadnought stands roughly 3 to 4 meters tall, depending on the pattern. Some, like the massive Leviathan pattern, tower even higher, reaching heights that allow them to peer into second-story windows. Their armored shell is layered ceramite and adamantium, materials so resilient that even dedicated anti-tank weapons struggle to penetrate. The armor plating is thick enough to shrug off bolter rounds, laser fire, and all but the most concentrated small arms. Each dreadnought is festooned with purity seals, battle honors, and chapter heraldry. They are walking monuments to their chapter's history, every scar and dent telling a story of battles won and foes vanquished. But it is the weapons that truly define a dreadnought's role in battle. These are not the weapons of infantry, scaled up. These are dedicated heavy weapons platforms that would normally require vehicle mounting. A standard dreadnought configuration includes a close combat weapon on one arm and a ranged weapon on the other, allowing it to engage enemies at any distance. The close combat weapons are terrifying instruments of destruction. The Dreadnought Power Fist generates an energy field capable of disrupting molecular bonds, allowing it to crush plasteel and ceramite with equal ease. When a Dreadnought's fist closes around an enemy vehicle, the metal crumples like paper. When it strikes an infantry soldier, there is rarely enough left to identify. The Chain Fist variant takes this destructive capability further. Imagine a chainsaw blade nearly as long as a man is tall, its teeth reinforced adamantium, spinning at speeds that blur into invisibility. This weapon can carve through bunker walls, slice through armored hulls, and reduce enemy formations to component parts. The sound alone is enough to unnerve opponents. A screaming mechanical howl that drowns out even the thunder of gunfire. For range combat, dreadnoughts mount weapons that would be impossible for an individual soldier to carry. The assault cannon, perhaps the most iconic dreadnought weapon, fires hundreds of mass reactive rounds per minute. Each shell is larger than a human thumb, equipped with a small explosive charge that detonates after penetrating the target. When an assault cannon opens fire, it sounds like continuous thunder. The weapon can soar through light vehicles, shred infantry formations, and suppress even heavily armored opponents. The barrel glows cherry red with sustained fire, heat radiating in visible waves, yet the dreadnought fires on, its cooling systems managing the thermal load that would melt an ordinary weapon. Twin-linked lascannons offer a different approach. These directed energy weapons fire beams of coherent light hot enough to vaporize steel. When a lascannon beam strikes a target, there is a flash of intense light, a sharp crack of superheated air, and then molten metal. Against armored vehicles, lascannons are devastating. They punch clean holes through armor plating, the beam continuing through the interior to detonate ammunition stores and incinerate crew. A dreadnought mounting twin-linked lascannons becomes a dedicated tank hunter, capable of eliminating enemy armor from ranges where return fire is ineffective. Missile launchers grant versatility. A dreadnought can load crack missiles for anti-armor work or frag missiles for anti-personnel suppression. The ability to switch munition types mid-battle allows the dreadnought to adapt to changing tactical situations. Heavy flamers turn the dreadnought into a walking inferno, projecting streams of burning promethium that can clear buildings, bunkers, and trenches. The flames cling to everything they touch, burning so hot they can melt ceramite and cook enemy soldiers alive within their armor. Some dreadnought patterns mount specialized weapons. The Mortis pattern, a rare configuration, mounts two ranged weapons, sacrificing close combat capability for overwhelming firepower. These dreadnoughts can lay down suppressing fire that forces entire enemy formations to take cover. The Hellfire pattern replaces its close combat weapon with additional missile launchers, becoming a mobile artillery platform. The Furioso pattern, used by chapters like the Blood Angels, mounts dual close combat weapons and charges into melee with reckless fury. The dreadnought's armor is not passive protection. It is a system, layered and reactive. The outer ceramite plating can withstand direct hits from anti-tank weapons. Beneath this, adamantium reinforcement provides structural integrity. Void shields, on some patterns, can intercept incoming fire with energy barriers. The sarcophagus itself, the armored tomb housing the pilot, has additional protective layers. It must. The warrior within is irreplaceable, and while the dreadnought chassis can be repaired, the loss of the pilot means the permanent death of an irreplaceable hero. Mobility is deceptive. Dreadnoughts are not fast by the standards of vehicles. They cannot match the speed of bikes or the acceleration of jump-pack troops. But they are not immobile either. The magna coil muscles and electro-fiber bundles that drive their limbs grant them surprising agility. A dreadnought can navigate urban terrain, climb rubble, and maintain balance on unstable ground. They walk with the grace of a living being, their motion smooth and purposeful, rather than the awkward lumber of a purely mechanical walker. When a dreadnought enters battle, it does so with purpose. The pilot has been awakened for this specific engagement. They have been briefed on the tactical situation shown the enemy they will face, reminded of the stakes. As their systems power up, as the weapons charge and the optical sensors calibrate, they feel the familiar surge of purpose that has sustained them through centuries. They are needed. The chapter requires their strength, and they will provide it, no matter the cost. This is the warrior that now faces an orc army, not a tank driven by crew who might flee, not infantry who might break and retreat, a dreadnought, a walking tomb piloted by a hero who has already proven they would rather die than surrender, now given the means to continue fighting long after mortal death should have claimed them. The orcs are about to learn what it means to face such a foe. The green tide rises. The orcs are not like other enemies the Imperium faces. They do not fight for territory, for resources, for ideology, or survival. Orcs fight because fighting is the entire purpose of their existence. They are a warrior race engineered by the ancient Old Ones during the War in Heaven, biologically crafted to be the ultimate soldiers. 60 million years later, their creators long extinct, the orcs continue to wage war across the galaxy simply because that is what they were made to do. Understanding orc biology is essential to understanding why they fight the way they do. An orc is not entirely animal. It is a hybrid organism, part animal and part fungus. This dual nature gives them advantages that would be impossible for purely biological beings. Their fungal component allows them to photosynthesize, drawing energy directly from light. This means orc armies require minimal supply lines. They do not need constant food deliveries. They can fight on barren worlds where other armies would starve. As long as there is light, an orc can sustain itself. The fungal biology also grants remarkable regenerative capabilities. Wounds that would be fatal to humans close within hours on orc flesh. Lost limbs can be sewn back on, often by crude orc surgeons called pain boys, and will reattach given time. Orcs feel pain, but they process it differently than humans. Pain is just another sensation, barely worth noting in the chaos of combat. An orc with an arm blown off will often just pick up a weapon with the remaining hand and continue fighting, bellowing with laughter at the inconvenience. When an orc dies, their body releases millions of microscopic spores into the environment. These spores drift on the wind, settle into soil, and begin growing. This is how orcs reproduce. There is no childhood, no families, no raising of young. The spores grow into different forms of orcoid life. Some become snotlings, small primitive creatures barely sentient. Others become Gretchen, diminutive greenskins used as servants and cannon fodder. And some become full orcs, emerging from the ground already adult, already knowing instinctively how to fight and survive. This means orc infestations are nearly impossible to fully eliminate. Even if you kill every orc on a planet, the spores they released will spawn new generations. Within years, sometimes months, a new orc presence will emerge. The only way to truly cleanse a world of orcs is exterminatus, total destruction of the planet's biosphere. Anything less is temporary. But perhaps the most dangerous aspect of orc biology is the gestalt psychic field they generate. Orcs are latently psychic, though they do not use their abilities like other psychic races. Instead, all orcs contribute to a collective psychic field that grows stronger with numbers. This field has several effects, all of them problematic for their enemies. First, it allows orcs to instinctively recognize hierarchy. The biggest orc is automatically in charge, not because of any formal structure, but because the gestalt field makes all orcs aware of who is bigger. This prevents internal conflicts over leadership. There are fights, certainly. Orcs love fighting, but questions of command are settled instinctively. Second, the gestalt field has reality warping properties. If enough orcs believe something strongly enough, it becomes true. This is not metaphorical. Orc vehicles painted red actually go faster because orcs believe red is the fastest color. Orc weapons that should not function, ramshackle assemblies of scrap metal and hope, work perfectly well in orc hands because orcs believe they will work. This makes orc technology both unreliable and unpredictable. A weapon that jams constantly when used by a human will fire flawlessly for an orc. A vehicle held together with wire and prayers will run indefinitely as long as the orc driving it believes it should. Third, the gestalt field amplifies as more orcs gather. A single orc is dangerous. 10 orcs are exponentially more dangerous. Not just because of numbers, but because the psychic field makes them collectively more effective. 100 orcs become a serious threat. 1,000 orcs are a catastrophe. And when millions of orcs gather under a single warboss, when the gestalt field reaches critical mass, that is when a massive green crusade begins. A tidal wave of violence that the orcs call a grand campaign. An orc army is not organized like an imperial army. There are no formal ranks, no supply officers, no strategic planning departments. Instead, orc armies are organized around what the orcs find fun and effective. The largest orc, the warbus, is in charge. Beneath him are nobs, big orcs who serve as champions and enforcers. The bulk of the army consists of boys, standard orcs armed with whatever weapons they can scrounge. But within this loose structure, specialization emerges. Mech boys are orcs with an instinctive understanding of technology. They do not learn to be mechanics. They are born knowing how to build and repair machines. This knowledge is genetic, implanted by the old ones millions of years ago. Mech boys construct the ramshackle vehicles, maintain the weapons, and create the bizarre contraptions that orc armies deploy. Pain boys understand medicine and surgery in the same instinctive way. They keep the boys fighting, sewing on lost limbs, installing crude bionic replacements, and generally ensuring the orcs stay functional enough to reach the next fight. Their medical practices would horrify imperial chirurgeons, involving as they do saws, hammers, and staples applied with enthusiasm rather than precision, but they work well enough for orc physiology. Weird boys are perhaps the most dangerous orc specialists. They can consciously channel the Gestalt psychic field, directing its energy in combat. A weird boy can cause enemy heads to explode, hurl lightning from their hands, or teleport entire mobs of orcs across the battlefield. The power is unstable, difficult to control, and prone to catastrophic failures that can kill the weird boy and everyone nearby. But when it works, it provides orc armies with capabilities that make them far more dangerous than simple brutes with crude weapons. The standard orc boy stands approximately as tall as a large human, though their hunched posture makes them appear shorter. Straightened, many would exceed 2 meters. Their bodies are slabs of muscle, green skin tough as leather stretched over frames designed for violence. Orcs are strong enough to tear a human apart with their bare hands, durable enough to survive wounds that would kill lesser beings, and aggressive to a degree that borders on suicidal. Orc boys are typically armed with one of 2 loadouts. Shooter boys carry firearms, usually crude automatic weapons that spray bullets in the general direction of the enemy. Orc marksmanship is terrible by any objective standard. They hit on maybe 1 shot in 10. But when a mob of 30 orcs opens fire, spraying hundreds of rounds downrange, enough bullets find targets to make the fusillade deadly. Chopper boys prefer melee combat, wielding rough blades and charging into close quarters. Orcs excel in melee. Their strength and toughness give them advantages over most opponents, and their complete lack of fear means they will throw themselves into combat situations where more sensible beings would retreat. Supporting these basic troops are specialist units. Storm boys are orcs equipped with crude rocket packs that allow them to leap across the battlefield. The packs are unreliable, prone to exploding, but orcs consider this an acceptable risk for the thrill of flight. Tank busters specialize in destroying vehicles, armed with rocket launchers and various anti-armor weapons. They live for the moment when they can blow up an enemy tank. The bigger the better. Looters are orcs obsessed with heavy weapons. They scavenge anything that can project Daka, as orcs call firepower, and use it enthusiastically. A looter might be carrying an Imperial heavy bolter, a salvaged Eldar weapon, or something the local mech boy welded together from scrap. It does not matter as long as it makes noise and kills things. Nobs are bigger than standard boys, often equipped with better weapons and armor. They serve as elite infantry, leading charges and providing a solid core of experienced fighters. Meganobs take this further, wearing massive suits of thick armor plates that make them nearly immune to small arms fire. They wade into battle wielding power claws and massive shooters, crushing and blasting anything in reach. Orc vehicles deserve special mention. They should not work. They are assemblies of scrap metal, often incorporating parts from a dozen different sources, held together with bolts, wire, and welding. It would make any Imperial tech priest weep. Paint is slathered on in thick coats, usually red for speed, though other colors serve other purposes. Yellow makes explosions bigger. Purple makes things sneaky because no one has ever seen a purple orc. These beliefs, reinforced by the Gestalt field, make the paint actually work as advertised. Trucks are the basic orc transport, open-topped vehicles that carry mobs of boys into battle. They are fast, fragile, and loud, belching smoke as they race across the battlefield. Battle wagons are larger, heavily armored transports that can carry entire mobs and mount serious weaponry. Some battle wagons sport massive rollers on the front, designed to crush anyone foolish enough to stand in front of the vehicle as it charges. Orc walkers are perhaps the most disturbing weapons in their arsenal. Def Dreads are Orc equivalents of Imperial Dreadnoughts, walkers with an Orc pilot surgically wired into the machine. Unlike Space Marine Dreadnoughts, where entombment is an honor, Orc pilots volunteer for Def Dreads seeking power and prestige. The process is agonizing, trapping the Orc in a hot, loud, uncomfortable metal box for the rest of their life. Most Def Dread pilots go slowly insane from the confinement. This makes them even more dangerous, as their already unstable psychology becomes completely unhinged. Killer Cans are smaller walkers piloted by Gretchen. Despite being operated by the weakest Orcoids, Killer Cans are surprisingly effective. The Gretchen inside are protected by armored shells and given access to weapons far more powerful than they could normally use. Entire mobs of Killer Cans, directed by a big mech, can pose serious threats even to armored formations. When an Orc army gathers, it does so through a process of escalation. A single Orc tribe might raid a settlement. Success draws other tribes who want to join the fun. The warboss who leads these successful raids grows bigger, a literal physiological response to victory and dominance. As he grows, his psychic presence strengthens, attracting more Orcs. More success leads to more growth, which attracts more followers, creating a feedback loop. Eventually, the gathering reaches critical mass. The Gestalt field becomes powerful enough that Orcs from across entire sectors feel its pull. They come, drawn by an instinctive need to be part of something magnificent. The warboss at the center becomes a towering figure of muscle and authority, sometimes reaching 3 or even 4 meters in height. A green-skinned giant whose mere presence can quell disputes among lesser Orcs. This is when the grand campaign begins. Tens of thousands of Orcs, sometimes hundreds of thousands or even millions, all united by their desire for violence and conquest. They pile into whatever vehicles are available, commandeer ships, and set off to find enemies to fight. The target does not matter much. Imperial worlds, Eldar craftworlds, Tor colonies, even Tyranid hive fleets will do. Orcs are happy to fight anyone who will fight back. And they are equally happy to fight each other if no other enemies are available. The Orc approach to battle is straightforward: advance toward the enemy while shooting everything. Then charge into melee and kill whatever is in reach. This might sound simplistic, even stupid, but it is terrifyingly effective when executed with sufficient numbers and enthusiasm. Imperial commanders who dismiss Orcs as stupid brutes usually do not survive their first encounter with a green tide. The Orcs may lack sophistication, but they compensate with overwhelming force, unbreakable morale, and regenerative capabilities that make them nearly impossible to eliminate. Against such an enemy, what chance does a single Dreadnought have? The mathematics seem insurmountable. One walker, however powerful, against thousands or tens of thousands of Orcs. The answer lies not in mathematics but in will, in firepower, and in the terrible efficiency of a warrior who has fought for centuries and learned to make every shot count. The arsenal of the ancients, the Dreadnought's weapons are not chosen casually. Each configuration reflects not just chapter doctrine, but the specific tactical situation the Dreadnought will face. When deploying against Orcs, the tech marines who prepare the ancient warrior must balance anti-armor capability, infantry suppression, and close combat potential. The Green Tide presents unique challenges that demand unique solutions. The assault cannon is perhaps the most devastating anti-infantry weapon in the Dreadnought's arsenal. This rotary autocannon fires depleted uranium rounds at a rate approaching 1,000 rounds per minute. Each round is 30 millimeters in diameter, equipped with a small explosive charge that detonates after penetration. When an assault cannon fires, it creates a sound like continuous rolling thunder, a bass rumble that can be felt in the chest cavity from hundreds of meters away. The practical effects against Orc infantry are catastrophic. A 1-second burst from an assault cannon can fire 15 to 20 rounds. Each round that impacts an Orc boy does not simply kill the target. The mass reactive charge explodes inside the body, liquefying internal organs and often blowing limbs from the torso. In a tightly packed Orc mob, a single round might kill or maim multiple targets as the explosion sends shrapnel in every direction. A sustained burst of 5 seconds can eliminate an entire squad of Orcs, turning them from a cohesive unit into scattered body parts and green mist. But the assault cannon is not perfect. It requires enormous amounts of ammunition. A Dreadnought typically carries between 400 and 600 rounds, enough for perhaps 30 seconds of sustained fire. Against an Orc army numbering in the thousands, ammunition conservation becomes critical. Every burst must be carefully calculated to maximize casualties while preserving enough ammunition for subsequent engagements. The weapon also generates tremendous heat. After continuous firing, the barrel glows red, hot heat distortion making targeting more difficult. The Dreadnought's cooling systems work to manage this thermal load, but physics has limits. Twin-linked las cannons offer a different capability set. These directed energy weapons fire beams of coherent light generated by banks of high-energy cells. Each shot draws enormous power, enough to run a small settlement for a day, and releases it in a microsecond pulse. The beam is so energetic that it ionizes the air along its path, creating a visible lance of light accompanied by a sharp crack of thunder. Against Orc vehicles, las cannons are devastating. An Orc battle wagon, for all its armor plating and ramshackle toughness, cannot withstand a direct hit from a las cannon. The beam punches through the armor as if it were paper, superheating the metal until it vaporizes. The beam continues through the vehicle's interior, flash boiling any Orcs unlucky enough to be in its path and often detonating ammunition stores. A single las cannon shot can transform a charging battle wagon into a flaming wreck, killing everyone aboard. But las cannons have drawbacks against massed infantry. Each shot is powerful enough to kill an Orc boy, certainly. The beam will punch clean through the target, through the Orc behind that one, and several more beyond. But compared to the area suppression of an assault cannon, the las cannon's single target focus is inefficient when facing hordes. A Dreadnought mounting twin las cannons must prioritize targets carefully, eliminating vehicles and heavy weapons platforms while relying on other capabilities to handle infantry. The heavy flamer transforms the Dreadnought into a walking inferno. This weapon projects a stream of burning promethium, an incendiary gel that clings to everything it touches and burns at temperatures exceeding 2000 degrees Celsius. The flame stream can reach out to perhaps 20 meters, engulfing everything in a cone of fire. Against Orc infantry, the heavy flamer is nightmarishly effective. Orcs are tough, regenerative, and fearless, but nothing regenerates from being burned to ash. When a heavy flamer sweeps across an Orc mob, the greenskins are consumed in seconds. Their crude armor offers no protection. The promethium burns through metal, through leather, through the tough green skin that normally shrugs off las fire. Orcs caught in the flame stream are reduced to blackened skeletons, their bodies collapsing as the fire consumes muscle and sinew. The heavy flamer also has psychological impact even on Orcs. These are beings who laugh at injury, who consider lost limbs mere inconveniences. But fire awakens something primal even in them. Orcs caught at the edge of a flamer's reach will often retreat, not from fear exactly, but from the instinctive understanding that staying means death. This makes the heavy flamer valuable not just for killing, but for breaking up enemy formations, creating gaps in the green tide that other weapons can exploit. The weapon's limitations are range and ammunition. 20 meters is extremely close in modern warfare. A Dreadnought must allow Orc mobs to close to near, melee range before the flamer becomes effective. This requires nerve and tactical acumen, holding fire while thousands of bellowing greenskins charge closer. And promethium, while deadly, is also limited in supply. A Dreadnought's heavy flamer typically carries enough fuel for 10 to 15 seconds of continuous fire. Used wisely, this is enough to break multiple charges. Used carelessly, it leaves the Dreadnought without one of its most effective close-range weapons. Missile launchers grant versatility at the cost of specialization. A Dreadnought mounting a missile launcher carries a mix of munitions, typically including crack missiles for armor penetration and frag missiles for anti-personnel work. The launcher can fire every few seconds, and the missiles are guided, able to adjust their course mid-flight to track moving targets. Crack missiles carry shaped charge warheads designed to penetrate vehicle armor. Against Orc vehicles, they are highly effective. The warhead detonates on impact, focusing the explosive force into a jet of superheated plasma that burns through armor plating. A direct hit from a crack missile will disable or destroy most Orc vehicles, making the missile launcher valuable for eliminating battle wagons, trucks, and def dreads at range. Frag missiles contain high explosive warheads surrounded by shrapnel. They are designed to detonate above or among infantry formations, showering the area with fragments traveling at supersonic velocities. Against packed Orc mobs, a frag missile can kill or wound dozens of boys with a single shot. The missile's guidance system allows it to be programmed for airburst, detonating at optimal altitude to maximize the shrapnel pattern. The missile launcher's main drawback is limited ammunition. A Dreadnought typically carries between 6 and 12 missiles, depending on the launcher type and available storage. This means every shot must count. Missiles cannot be wasted on targets that could be handled with other weapons. Against an Orc army, the Dreadnought pilot must constantly evaluate whether a target justifies a precious missile, or whether it should be engaged with the assault cannon or las cannons instead. But perhaps the most terrifying weapon in the Dreadnought's arsenal is the close combat weapon itself. The Dreadnought Power Fist is a massive gauntlet, easily large enough to enclose a human torso in its grip. The fist generates a disruption field around itself, a halo of crackling energy that violates molecular bonds on contact. This field allows the fist to crush materials that should be impossible to damage with mere physical force. When a Dreadnought Power Fist strikes an Orc boy, the result is immediate and messy. The energy field disrupts the cellular structure of the Orc's body on contact. The physical impact, backed by the Dreadnought's massive strength, delivers force measured in tons. The combination liquefies bone, pulverizes organs, and often explodes the target in a shower of gore. Orc knobs, larger and tougher than standard boys, fare only slightly better. The Power Fist can tear them apart just as easily, the disruption field negating any advantage their size provides. Against Orc vehicles, the Power Fist demonstrates its true purpose. An Orc truck, ramshackle assembly of scrap metal though it is, still has structural integrity. The metal can withstand considerable punishment. But when a Dreadnought Power Fist closes around the vehicle's frame, the disruption field causes the metal to simply fail. Welds separate, plates tear. The vehicle crumples like a child's toy, the shrieking of tearing metal audible even over the roar of battle. Orcs inside are crushed, their bodies broken by collapsing metal or shredded by flying debris. The Chainfist variant offers different advantages. Instead of a disruption field, the Chainfist mounts an enormous chainsaw blade along the arm. The blade is nearly 2 meters long, its teeth adamantium alloy designed to cut through the toughest materials. The teeth spin at velocities that blur them into invisibility, driven by powerful motors housed in the Dreadnought's arm.
You know, one of the things I found most fascinating about this whole scenario is that perfectly encapsulate what makes Warhammer 40k so compelling. It's not just about the spectacle of violence or the impressive kill counts, it's the tragedy of it all. Here you have a warrior who already died once, who was denied rest and sealed in a metal tomb, now standing alone against thousands of enemies who literally cannot feel fear or despair. Both sides are locked in their nature. The Dreadnought cannot stop fighting because duty won't allow it, and the Orcs cannot stop attacking because joy won't allow it. There's something almost poetic about that, in a very, very grim way. Anyways, let's go back to the story.
When a Chainfist strikes a target, it does not rely on energy disruption. Instead, it simply cuts. The teeth bite into armor, into flesh, into whatever they contact, and tear it apart through brute mechanical force. Against Orc infantry, the Chainfist is devastating. A single sweep can saw through multiple Orcs, the blade cutting them into pieces before they even realize they have been hit. The weapon creates a sound unlike any other on the battlefield, a mechanical scream that rises above gunfire and explosions. Against vehicles and structures, the Chainfist is perhaps even more effective than the Power Fist. While the Power Fist must find a grip point to crush its target, the Chainfist can simply cut. Orc bunkers, their walls thick ferrocrete reinforced with scrap metal, fall to the Chainfist like timber before a saw. Battle wagons, their armor too distributed to effectively crush, are carved open, the Chainfist slicing through them lengthwise. The weapon can even engage enemy walkers, cutting through the legs of deaf dreads or killer cans, leaving them immobilized and helpless. The Dreadnought's armor deserves equal attention. The outer shell is layered ceramite plating, the same material used in Space Marine power armor, but far thicker. Each plate is perhaps 10 to 15 centimeters thick, enough to stop bolter rounds, shrapnel, and most small arms fire. The ceramite is designed to ablate rather than crack when hit, meaning damage is spread across the surface rather than penetrating deep. Beneath the ceramite lies adamantium reinforcement. This incredibly dense metal forms the Dreadnought's structural skeleton. Adamantium cannot be cut or crushed by conventional means. It requires specialized tools or tremendous force to damage. The adamantium frame ensures that even if the ceramite plating is stripped away, the Dreadnought retains structural integrity. The sarcophagus, the armored tomb housing the pilot, has its own protection layers. It sits deep within the Dreadnought's torso, surrounded by armor, support systems, and machinery. To reach the sarcophagus, an attacker must first penetrate the outer armor, then damage or destroy the power plant, weapon systems, and various other components. By the time anything threatens the sarcophagus directly, the Dreadnought is already catastrophically damaged. Some Dreadnought patterns include void shield generators. These create energy barriers that can intercept incoming fire. A void shield will stop several hits before collapsing, buying the Dreadnought precious seconds to eliminate the threat or move to cover. The shields are not invulnerable. Concentrated fire will overwhelm them. But against an Orc army, where most weapons are relatively light, void shields can extend the Dreadnought's survivability significantly. Mobility, while not the Dreadnought's strength, is adequate. The magna coil muscles that drive the legs are powerful and responsive. A Dreadnought can walk at speeds comparable to a running human, perhaps 15 to 20 kilometers per hour in open terrain. They can manage short bursts of higher speed, though this is inadvisable except in emergencies due to the strain on components. The legs are digitigrade, providing stability and allowing the Dreadnought to navigate uneven terrain with surprising grace. The sensors and targeting systems are military-grade equipment, far superior to unaugmented human vision. Optical sensors provide vision across multiple spectrums, from infrared to ultraviolet. Targeting computers can track dozens of contacts simultaneously, calculating firing solutions and threat assessments in real time. The pilot perceives all this information through neural interface, the data flowing directly into their consciousness, as if it were natural vision. Communication systems allow the Dreadnought to coordinate with other Imperial forces. Vox casters can broadcast across tactical frequencies, while encrypted channels provide secure communication with chapter command. The Dreadnought can serve as a mobile command post if needed, its superior sensors and elevated position making it ideal for battlefield coordination. When all these systems work together, when weapons, armor, and mobility combine with the tactical genius of the pilot, the Dreadnought becomes more than a weapons platform. It becomes an embodiment of the chapter's might, a walking monument to the Emperor's fury, and a killing machine capable of turning the tide of battles through sheer overwhelming force, applied with centuries of tactical experience. Against an Orc army, it will need every advantage these systems provide. First contact, the moment when a Dreadnought first engages an Orc army, is perhaps the most critical juncture of the entire battle. Decisions made in these opening seconds will cascade through the hours to come, determining whether the ancient warrior survives or whether their centuries of service finally end on this battlefield. The Dreadnought pilot, freshly awakened from stasis sleep, must rapidly assess the tactical situation while their systems complete final activation protocols. The battlefield is rarely ideal. Perhaps it is an Imperial hive city, its streets choked with rubble and the bodies of defenders who fell trying to stem the green tide. Perhaps it is an agri world, vast fields of grain now trampled under thousands of Orc boots. Maybe it is an industrial complex, its refineries and factories providing cover and concealment for both attacker and defender. Whatever the terrain, it shapes how the engagement will develop. The Orc army, when first observed through the Dreadnought's optical sensors, is a chaotic mass that defies traditional military organization. There are no neat ranks, no ordered formations marching in step. Instead, the Orcs surge forward in a loose mob that somehow maintains enough cohesion to be effective. They bellow war cries in their crude language, wave weapons above their heads, and compete with each other to be first into combat. The noise alone is overwhelming. Thousands of Orc throats roaring, engines of ramshackle vehicles grinding and backfiring, the irregular rattle of Orc shooters firing wildly. From distance, perhaps 1,000 meters or more, the Dreadnought begins its analysis. The targeting computer identifies distinct elements within the horde. There, a mob of perhaps 50 boys armed with choppers, charging forward ahead of the main body. Behind them, trucks loaded with more boys, the vehicles bouncing across rough terrain at speeds that should tear them apart. Further back, the heavier elements, battle wagons, their crude armor plating clearly visible even at range. Deft dreads, walking in that distinctive Orc gait that is simultaneously clumsy and effective. And everywhere more boys, hundreds of them, thousands. The Dreadnought's tactical computer attempts to generate a casualty estimate, calculating how many Orcs would need to be eliminated to break the assault. The number it produces is sobering. Against most enemies, breaking their wall requires inflicting 20 to 30% casualties. Armies collapse when they lose a quarter of their strength, the survivors fleeing rather than continuing to fight a clearly lost battle. Orcs do not break. There are accounts in Imperial records of Orc forces continuing to attack, even after suffering 90% casualties. The survivors simply do not care that most of their army is dead. If anything, they fight harder, excited by the violence and eager to prove themselves the biggest and strongest. The psychological calculus that applies to human or even Chaos forces is irrelevant when facing greenskins. This means the Dreadnought cannot fight to break enemy morale. It must fight to eliminate threats. Every Orc that falls must be one that can no longer contribute to the battle. Wounded do not count, Orcs regenerate too quickly. An Orc missing an arm will pick up a weapon in the other hand and keep fighting. An Orc with a gut wound will tie some cloth around it and charge onward, even as their entrails drag behind them. Only the dead can be safely ignored, and even then, their bodies will release spores that spawn new Orcs in the coming months. The first decision point: engage at maximum range or allow them to close. Engaging at maximum range has advantages. The Dreadnought's weapons outrange most Orc small arms significantly. Las cannons can reach out to nearly 1,000 meters. The assault cannon is effective at 500. From these distances, the Dreadnought can inflict casualties while remaining relatively safe from return fire. The Orcs will shoot back, certainly. They always do. But Orc marksmanship is poor, and at long range, only the luckiest shots will find their target. But maximum range engagement also has drawbacks. Ammunition expenditure becomes problematic. At 1,000 meters, every shot must count. Missed shots cannot be recovered. And against a horde, even with perfect accuracy, the mathematics are unfavorable. If the Dreadnought fires one shot every 2 seconds, it can eliminate 30 Orcs per minute. Optimistic, certainly, not every shot will kill. But even accepting this generous estimate, eliminating 1,000 Orcs requires more than 30 minutes of continuous, perfect shooting. 30 minutes is an eternity in combat. The Orcs will not stand still and allow themselves to be shot. They will advance, using terrain for cover, spreading out to reduce the effectiveness of each shot. Some will have vehicles that move faster than the Dreadnought can target them. Others will be obscured by smoke, dust, or the bodies of their fellows. And all the while, they will be shooting back. Poorly aimed, yes, but thousands of poorly aimed shots create a probability field where something will hit. The alternative approach allows the Orcs to close to optimal range, then unleash maximum firepower. This requires discipline and nerve. Watching thousands of Orcs charge while holding fire goes against every combat instinct. But if the Dreadnought can maintain position and composure, allowing the enemy to cluster at close range before engaging, the results can be devastating. An assault cannon at 200 meters range, firing into a packed Orc mob, will kill multiple targets with every burst. The heavy flamer, waiting until the Orcs are practically at arm's reach, can eliminate entire mobs with single gouts of flame. The risk is obvious. If the timing is miscalculated, if the Orcs reach melee range before enough casualties are inflicted, the Dreadnought can be overwhelmed. Orcs in melee are dangerous. A knob with a power claw can crack ceramite plating. A mob of boys working together can swarm over the Dreadnought, hacking at joints and sensors. Enough Orcs, given time, can disable even a Dreadnought through sheer persistent damage. The pilot must weigh these considerations in seconds. Centuries of experience inform the decision, but each battlefield is unique. Perhaps the terrain favors defense, with the Dreadnought positioned in a choke point where the Orcs must funnel through a narrow approach. Perhaps the situation is more desperate, with the Dreadnought deployed in open ground where the enemy can attack from multiple directions simultaneously. Let us imagine a specific scenario, one that captures the terrible reality of such an engagement. The Dreadnought stands in the ruins of an Imperial administratum building. The structure, once 5 stories of offices and bureaucratic function, is now reduced to rubble and skeletal framework. The Dreadnought has positioned itself in what was once the main entrance, a wide archway now offering clear fields of fire down the avenue that approaches the building. Behind the Dreadnought, deeper in the ruins, are the tattered remnants of an Imperial Guard regiment. They have perhaps 200 effectives remaining from an original strength of 3,000. They are exhausted, low on ammunition, and on the verge of breaking. The Orc army approaches down the avenue. The targeting computer counts them. 800 visible contacts, likely more behind buildings or inside streets. The mob fills the avenue from wall to wall, a sea of green flesh and crude armor. At the front are boys with choppers, eager for close combat. Behind them, shooters spray bullets in wild arcs, the rounds sparking off pavement and buildings. 3 trucks weave through the mob, their orc drivers swerving around slower infantry, and in the distance, perhaps 500 meters back, a battle wagon grinds forward, its main cannon already firing. The shot goes wide, impacting a building to the Dreadnought's left. Ferrocrete explodes, showering the area with debris. The Dreadnought, configured with assault cannon and power fist, makes its decision. It will allow the enemy to close to 300 meters, then open fire. At that range, the assault cannon will be devastating against the packed mob. The heavy flamer, mounted under the power fist, will be held in reserve for any orcs that reach close range. The weight is excruciating. The orcs charge forward bellowing. Some fire their weapons at extreme range, bullets whistling past the Dreadnought or ricocheting off its armor. The impacts sound like rain on a metal roof. Individual rounds, not yet dangerous, but the volume of fire is increasing as more orcs enter range. 400 meters. The battle wagon fires again. This shot is closer, impacting the pavement 30 meters in front of the Dreadnought. The shell explodes, sending shrapnel in every direction. Most bounces off the Dreadnought's armor. A few pieces find gaps, scraping against less protected components. Minor damage. Acceptable. 350 meters. The trucks are ahead of the main mob now, racing forward at maximum speed. Each carries perhaps 12 orcs. They are priority targets. Mobile, able to deliver troops to close range quickly, and their speed makes them harder to hit than infantry. 300 meters. The Dreadnought's assault cannon spins up, the barrels rotating before firing commences. The sound is distinctive, a whirring mechanical whine that rises in pitch. Then the weapon speaks. The first burst lasts 2 seconds, perhaps 30 rounds. Every trace a fifth round, so the stream of fire appears as a solid line of light reaching from the Dreadnought to the nearest truck. The vehicle disintegrates. The assault cannon rounds punch through the thin armor as if it were paper, continuing through the orcs inside. The vehicle's momentum carries it forward for a moment, even as it comes apart, pieces of metal and orcs spinning away. Then the fuel tank detonates, a ball of orange flame expanding upward. The Dreadnought's targeting computer is already tracking the second truck. Another burst. This vehicle swerves at the last moment, presenting its side rather than front. It saves perhaps 2 of the orcs aboard. The assault cannon tears through the passenger compartment, killing the rest. The vehicle careens off course, crashing into the mob of boys. Orcs are crushed under its wheels before it finally grinds to a halt. Third truck. The driver sees what happened to the first 2 and attempts evasive maneuvers, weaving side to side. It makes him harder to hit. Not hard enough. The assault cannon tracks the movement, leading the target. The burst catches the truck in the engine compartment. Something vital fails. The engine seizes. The vehicle lurches to a stop. Orcs bail out, jumping from the suddenly stationary target. 10 seconds have elapsed. 3 trucks eliminated. Perhaps 30 orcs killed. 770 remaining, and they are still charging. The assault cannon swings to target the main mob. At this range, missing is nearly impossible. The orcs are packed so densely that every round finds a target. The weapon fires in controlled bursts now. 3 to 4 seconds of fire followed by a pause to allow the barrels to cool fractionally. Each burst cuts swaths through the mob. Orcs fall, their bodies torn apart by explosive rounds. The front rank disintegrates, then the second, then the third. The orcs behind do not slow. They trample over their dead, roaring louder if anything. An orc that sees combat, even if only from watching his fellows die, becomes more enthusiastic, not less. The Gestalt field strengthens with violence. Every orc death feeds energy into the collective psyche, making the survivors fight harder. 250 meters. The battle wagon is now a priority. Its main cannon fires again. This shot hits. The shell strikes the Dreadnought's left shoulder, where the assault cannon mounts. The explosion is tremendous, armor plating cracks. Warning runes flash in the pilot's neural feed. Damage to the ammunition feed mechanism. The assault cannon continues to function, but the available ammunition has dropped. Some of the feed belt was damaged in the explosion. The Dreadnought cannot afford to waste time on individual boys now. It must eliminate the battle wagon before it can fire again. The assault cannon swings toward the larger target, tracking through the crowd of infantry. The mob is close enough now that this movement crushes several orcs who are too slow to get out of the way. The Dreadnought's arm, massive and armored, simply bulldozes through them. The assault cannon fires at the battle wagon. The range is greater, perhaps 400 meters now. The targeting is complicated by the intervening orcs. Some rounds impact boys who step into the line of fire, but enough find the target. The battle wagon's armor is thicker than the truck's, but it is still orc construction. The assault cannon rounds punch through. One finds the cannon's ammunition store. The battle wagon explodes with such force that the shockwave knocks down orcs within 30 meters. The vehicle's armored shell, weighing several tons, is blown apart, pieces flying in every direction. A section of plating, perhaps 2 meters across, tumbles through the air and crashes down into the mob, crushing more orcs. The explosion creates a momentary gap in the charge, orcs instinctively pulling back from the fireball. But only for a moment. Then they charge forward again, flowing around the burning wreckage like water around a stone. 200 meters. The assault cannon continues its terrible work, firing into the mass. But the mathematics are becoming clear. The Dreadnought has killed perhaps 200 orcs. 600 remain. And they are close now, close enough that the fastest are almost within charge range. 150 meters. The first rockets from tank busters in the mob streak toward the Dreadnought. Most miss wildly, the tank busters simply pointing in the general direction and firing. One connects, hitting the Dreadnought's right leg. The warhead detonates, punching through the outer ceramite layer. Damage warnings flash. The leg's mobility is reduced. Not crippled, but impaired. 100 meters. The mob is starting to spread out, the orcs instinctively dispersing to make targeting harder. The assault cannon can still kill multiple orcs with each burst, but the density of targets is decreasing. Each shot is less effective than it was at closer range, 50 meters. The first orcs reach charge distance. They accelerate, bellowing, weapons raised. A mob of perhaps 30 boys, all armed with choppers, rushing forward in a ragged line. The heavy flamer activates. The stream of burning promethium catches the charging orcs at 20 meters, engulfing them in flame. They do not even have time to scream. The fire consumes them in seconds, leaving only blackened corpses that collapse mid-charge. But behind the first mob is a second, and a third. The heavy flamer sweeps across them, but the fuel tank is emptying. The stream sputters, then dies. The flamer has perhaps 3 seconds of fuel remaining. The Dreadnought must conserve it, 30 meters. The assault cannon is glowing red now, heat radiating in visible waves. The weapon has fired nearly 300 rounds in less than a minute. The barrels need to cool, or risk catastrophic failure. But there is no time. The orcs are nearly at melee range. 20 meters, the assault cannon fires its last burst, the weapon's ammunition finally exhausted. The burst kills a dozen orcs, but there are dozens more behind them. 10 meters. The first orc, a massive knob wielding a power claw, reaches the Dreadnought. The power fist meets him mid-charge. The disruption field flares. The knob's body explodes, literally coming apart from the energy discharge. The pieces shower the orcs behind him, and then they arrive. 50 orcs, 100. Flooding around the Dreadnought's legs. They hack at the armor with choppers. They fire shooter's point, blank into joints and sensors. They climb on the Dreadnought's body, smashing at vents and access panels. The battle has entered its second phase. The ranged duel is over. Now comes the brutal close. Quarters grind where the Dreadnought must hold against overwhelming numbers through sheer endurance and the crushing power of its close combat weapon. This is where the true test begins. The grinding middle, the melee phase of a battle between a Dreadnought and an orc horde is not the heroic single combat of ancient legend. There are no dramatic duels, no pauses for speeches or gestures of respect. It is simply butchery, conducted at a pace that would exhaust ordinary soldiers in minutes, but which the Dreadnought must sustain for hours. The ancient warrior, entombed in metal and driven by duty that has endured for centuries, settles into the rhythm of killing with mechanical precision. The power fist rises and falls with metronomic regularity. Each strike kills or cripples. An orc charges from the left, the fist intercepts it mid-stride, the impact audible even over the roar of battle. The orc's body simply ceases to exist as a coherent form, reduced to components by the disruption field and the tremendous force of impact. Before the pieces hit the ground, the fist is already moving to intercept the next target. An orc to the right, climbing on the Dreadnought's leg, attempting to reach the vents that cool the power plant. The power fist descends. The orc is crushed against the armored leg, green blood spraying in all directions. But killing individual orcs, no matter how efficiently, cannot stem the tide. For every orc the Dreadnought eliminates, 2 more take its place. The mathematics of attrition are brutal. The Dreadnought can kill perhaps 1 orc every 2 seconds with the power fist. 30 per minute. Nearly 2,000 per hour if that pace could be maintained. But the orcs number in the thousands, and they are not queuing politely to be killed. They attack from all sides simultaneously, forcing the Dreadnought to divide its attention. The assault cannon, now cooled enough to function again but still empty of ammunition, hangs useless. The Dreadnought would need to retreat to a supply point to reload, and there is no supply point. The ammunition it deployed with is all the ammunition it will have. The heavy flamer still retains a few seconds of fuel, held in reserve for a critical moment. Every other system must carry the burden of continued combat. The Orcs have shifted tactics, though to call it tactics might be generous. The initial mob that charged the Dreadnought has been largely eliminated. 300 Orcs dead or dying in the first minute of melee, their bodies carpeting the ground around the ancient walker. But the Orcs behind them learned from watching the slaughter. They no longer charge directly into the power fist's reach. Instead, they spread out, attacking from multiple directions simultaneously, forcing the Dreadnought to choose which threat to address. A Nob, larger and more cunning than the standard boys, circles to the Dreadnought's rear. He carries a power claw, the Orc equivalent of the power fist, and he understands how to use it. While the Dreadnought is engaged with boys to its front, the Nob charges from behind. His power claw, crackling with energy, strikes the back of the Dreadnought's right leg, aiming for the joint where mobility is most vulnerable. The Dreadnought's sensors detect the movement. The pilot, through neural interface, perceives the threat as clearly as if they had eyes in the back of their head. The Dreadnought pivots, the motion surprisingly fast for something so massive. The power fist sweeps in a horizontal arc, catching the Nob before his attack can fully connect. The Nob is hurled backward, his body broken. But his power claw did connect, if only for a fraction of a second. Armor plating at the joint is scorched. Damage runes indicate reduced mobility in that leg. This is the pattern that will repeat thousands of times. The Orcs probe for weaknesses, attacking joints' vents, sensor arrays. Most attacks are turned aside by the Dreadnought's armor or intercepted by the power fist. But some get through. Each successful hit, no matter how minor, degrades the Dreadnought's capabilities fractionally. A damaged sensor reduces targeting accuracy. A cracked armor plate weakens structural integrity. A severed hydraulic line reduces power to a limb. 20 minutes into the melee, the Dreadnought has killed over 400 Orcs. But it has also accumulated damage. The right leg is now operating at 70% efficiency, the joint damaged by multiple hits. The left arm, the one mounting the now empty assault cannon, has taken hits to the shoulder joint. The arm still functions but is slower to respond. 2 external sensor arrays have been destroyed, reducing peripheral vision. Heat buildup in the torso is approaching critical levels. The vents that normally cool the power plant are partially clogged with Orc blood and debris. The pilot feels none of this as pain. The neural interface does not transmit pain signals from damaged components. But it does transmit awareness of diminished capability, a kind of numbness that spreads as systems fail. It is similar to the feeling of a limb going to sleep, that strange not quite pain sensation of reduced function. Except this is happening to the entire body, gradually, as the Orcs wear the Dreadnought down through sheer persistent damage. The Orcs, for their part, are having the time of their lives. This is exactly the kind of fight they exist for. A tough opponent who kills many of them, but cannot kill all of them. The longer the battle continues, the more the Gestalt field strengthens. The Orcs are fighting harder now than when the battle began. Each one eager to be the one who brings down the ancient walker. Warboss candidates see this as an opportunity to prove themselves. Nobs compete to see who can damage the Dreadnought most severely. This competitive aspect of Orc psychology creates tactical opportunities. When multiple Orc mobs approach from different directions, they often interfere with each other. 2 mobs might converge on the Dreadnought from opposite sides, each so focused on being first into combat that they collide with each other, creating confusion that the Dreadnought can exploit. An Orc Nob, charging at the Dreadnought's back, might find his path blocked by boys who won't move aside, their egalitarian hierarchy preventing them from deferring to his slightly greater status. The Dreadnought exploits these moments ruthlessly. When 2 Orc mobs collide, becoming entangled in an argument about who has right of way, the power fist descends on both, killing Orcs from both groups. This triggers a brawl between the groups, the surviving Orcs from each mob blaming the other for the deaths. For perhaps 30 seconds, the Orcs fight each other instead of the Dreadnought, their fractious nature overwhelming even their enthusiasm for killing the walker. But these moments of respite are brief. The Gestalt field eventually reasserts control. reminding the orcs that the Dreadnought is the real enemy. The brawl ends as suddenly as it began, the survivors turning their attention back to the true target. 40 minutes into the engagement, ammunition for all ranged weapons exhausted, the Dreadnought has killed over 700 orcs. The bodies are piled deep enough around the walker that they create obstacles to movement. Orcs approaching from certain directions must climb over corpses, slowing their advance and making them easier targets for the power fist. But this also means the Dreadnought stands in a pool of orc blood that is now ankle deep on its frame, the vital fluid soaking into every crevice and joint. The psychological dimension of the battle is as important as the physical. The Dreadnought pilot, their consciousness spread between the organic brain and the machine systems, must maintain focus despite circumstances that would break a normal mind. They are surrounded, outnumbered 100 to 1, sustaining continuous damage, and have no realistic hope of extraction. Every rational analysis of the situation concludes with the same result: eventual destruction is inevitable. But the pilot is not a normal mind. They are a space marine who served for decades or centuries before their entombment, then served additional centuries as a Dreadnought. They have fought in conditions like this before. They have been outnumbered, outgunned, surrounded, and written off as dead. And they have survived through skill, through endurance, through simple refusal to accept defeat. This mental resilience is critical. A human tank crew, facing similar odds, would likely abandon their vehicle and attempt to escape on foot. The psychology of self-preservation would override tactical objectives. But the Dreadnought pilot cannot abandon their post. The sarcophagus is both weapon and tomb. There is no escape, no running away. They will fight until destroyed or until the orcs are eliminated. The binary nature of the situation creates clarity. There are no decisions to make about retreat or surrender. There is only the next target to kill, and the one after that, and the one after that. The orcs sense this. The Gestalt field, in its crude way, perceives the Dreadnought's determination. This makes them respect the walker in their fashion. An orc respects strength and stubbornness. The Dreadnought is demonstrating both. The orcs are not discouraged by their casualties. If anything, they are more enthusiastic. This is a worthy opponent. Killing it will be an achievement to boast about. 1 hour into the melee, the tactical situation has evolved significantly. The Dreadnought has killed approximately 900 orcs, but the cost has been severe. The right leg is barely functional, responding sluggishly to commands and liable to lock up if stressed. The left arm, with its empty assault cannon, has been struck so many times that it can no longer elevate fully. Internal temperature is approaching redline levels. The cooling systems, damaged and clogged, struggle to dissipate the heat generated by continuous combat. The power fist, miraculously, still functions at near full capability. The weapon has killed hundreds of orcs. It is coated in gore, layers of green blood so thick they obscure the armored surface. But the disruption field generator and hydraulic systems remain intact. The fist rises and falls, each impact ending another orc's existence. The heavy flamer, still retaining a few seconds of fuel, represents the Dreadnought's last ranged capability. The pilot has conserved this resource carefully, waiting for the right moment. That moment arrives when an orc weirdboy, recognizable by the bizarre totems and glowing eyes, pushes through the mob toward the Dreadnought. Weirdboys are dangerous. They channel the Gestalt field, directing it as psychic attacks. A weirdboy can explode the Dreadnought's sensors with focused psychic energy, or worse, attempt to interfere with the neural interface that connects pilot to machine. The weirdboy raises his staff, psychic energy crackling around it. The Dreadnought does not wait to see what effect he intends. The heavy flamer activates. The stream of burning promethium catches the weirdboy and the dozen orcs surrounding him. The psychic energy the weirdboy was gathering detonates uncontrolled, the flames disrupting his concentration. The explosion, a blast of green energy mixed with fire, kills the weirdboy and everyone within 10 meters. The heavy flamer sputters and dies, its fuel exhausted. But the weirdboy is eliminated, the threat neutralized. The Dreadnought has no more ranged weapons. From this point forward it is purely melee combat. The battle grinds on. 90 minutes, 2 hours. The sun, which was rising when the engagement began, reaches its zenith and begins to descend. The Dreadnought fights through the entire arc, the changing light marking the passage of time more reliably than any chronometer. At 2.5 hours, the Dreadnought has killed over 1,200 orcs. But it is failing. The right leg has locked completely, frozen in position by damaged hydraulics. The walker can no longer pivot properly, reducing its ability to address threats to its flanks and rear. Power output from the reactor is declining, whether from battle damage or simple strain. The power fist is striking with fractionally less force, though still enough to crush orcs. Most critically, the pilot's awareness is beginning to fragment. The neural interface, stressed beyond normal operational parameters, occasionally glitches. For brief moments, the pilot loses connection to the Dreadnought systems, experiencing a disconnection that is profoundly disorienting. They are suddenly aware of their ruined body floating in the amniotic fluid, blind and helpless, before the interface reconnects and they are once again perceiving through sensors and acting through mechanical limbs. These moments of disconnection are dangerous. During one such episode, lasting perhaps 2 seconds, an orc nob manages to climb onto the Dreadnought's shoulder. By the time the pilot's awareness returns, the nob is smashing at a sensor array with a crude hammer. The power fist cannot reach the Dreadnought's own shoulder. The pilot instead causes the walker to lurch violently to the side, using momentum to throw the nob off. The nob falls into the crowd of orcs below, where the Dreadnought's stomping left leg crushes him into the blood-soaked ground. But the sensor array is destroyed. Another piece of awareness lost. The Dreadnought's perception of its environment continues to degrade sensor by sensor, until the pilot is operating on minimal input, forced to extrapolate enemy positions from fragmentary data. 3 hours, 1,400 orcs dead. The pile of bodies around the Dreadnought is now a hill, corpses stacked on corpses. The Dreadnought stands at the center of this mound of dead, still fighting, still killing. The orcs must climb the bodies of their fellows to reach the walker, and when they do, the power fist sends them tumbling back down, dead before they reach the bottom. But the end is approaching. The Dreadnought systems, pushed far beyond rated endurance, are failing in cascade. The left arm has seized completely, frozen in place. The right leg, locked since earlier in the battle, has developed stress fractures in the armor plating. The power fist continues to function, but power delivery is sporadic, the reactor struggling to maintain output. And still the orcs come. Not as many now. The Dreadnought has killed so many that the horde has visibly thinned. But there are hundreds remaining, and they show no sign of stopping. They climb over mountains of dead to reach their enemy, enthusiastically hurling themselves into combat against an opponent that has killed more than 1,000 of their fellows. This is the nature of the grinding middle phase. It is not dramatic. It is simply brutal mathematics, casualty counts accumulating while systems fail and damage spreads. The Dreadnought, designed to withstand tremendous punishment, is being worn down by sheer weight of numbers and the relentless aggression of an enemy that will not stop, will not retreat, will not accept any outcome except total victory or total annihilation. How the engagement resolves from this point depends on factors that cannot be predicted. Does the Dreadnought's reactor hold together long enough to eliminate the remaining orcs, or does it fail catastrophically? Do the orcs, finally, break and retreat? Or do they maintain their attack until the Dreadnought is destroyed? Does relief arrive in the form of other Imperial forces, or is the Dreadnought truly alone? The answer to these questions will determine whether the ancient warrior survives to be recovered and repaired, or whether this battlefield becomes their final resting place, their story ending after centuries of service in a pile of orc corpses, still fighting to the last. Tactical evolution, what makes the battle between a Dreadnought and an orc horde particularly fascinating from a military analysis perspective, is how both sides adapt as the engagement progresses. The orcs, despite their reputation for simplistic tactics, are capable of surprising sophistication when survival instincts kick in. The Dreadnought, piloted by a warrior with potentially centuries of combat experience, must constantly evolve their approach as circumstances change and systems fail. The initial orc assault, a straightforward charge into the teeth of the Dreadnought's firepower, succeeded in closing to melee range through sheer numerical superiority. The orcs paid a terrible price. Hundreds dead in the first minutes, but they achieved their objective engaging the walker in close combat, where their numbers provide maximum advantage. But after sustaining such heavy casualties, the orc tactical approach begins to shift. The first adaptation is targeting priority. The orcs initially attacked the Dreadnought indiscriminately, hacking at whatever part of the walker was closest. But as the battle progresses, the smarter nobs among the horde begin directing attacks towards specific components. They observe that the Dreadnought has limited mobility in its right leg and start concentrating attacks on that joint. attempting to completely cripple the walker. Multiple orcs work together, one striking high while another strikes low, trying to catch the power fist when it is engaged elsewhere. This coordinated targeting is not sophisticated by human military standards. The orcs are not following a detailed battle plan, but their natural cunning, enhanced by the Gestalt field's subtle coordination effects, produces tactics that are effective nonetheless. When one nob discovers that attacking the Dreadnought's vents causes visible damage, other nobs observe and begin targeting vents as well. The knowledge spreads through the mob not through verbal communication, but through imitation and the Gestalt field's information sharing properties. The Dreadnought counters this evolution by changing its defensive positioning. Early in the battle, the walker held a static position, using the terrain to limit enemy approach angles. But as systems fail and mobility degrades, static defense becomes untenable. The pilot instead begins using controlled movement, even with damaged legs, to prevent the orcs from establishing stable attack positions. Every few minutes, the Dreadnought shifts position, moving perhaps 10 or 20 meters. This seems minor, but it forces the orcs to readapt. Orcs that were attacking the rear must reposition. Mobs that were attempting to flank find themselves facing the power fist directly. The movement creates chaos in the orc ranks, breaking up coordinated attacks before they can fully develop. The movement also serves another purpose: clearing fields of fire for any remaining ranged weapons and creating breathing room. By moving away from areas where orc bodies have piled highest, the Dreadnought gives itself space to operate. The corpse piles, while initially an obstacle to orc movement, have become hazardous to the Dreadnought as well. Footing becomes uncertain when walking on bodies. Blood makes surfaces slippery. Moving to clearer ground, even at the cost of opening new approach angles, becomes necessary. The orcs adapt to this movement by attempting to predict where the Dreadnought will position next. It is crude prediction, based on observing patterns, but it has some success. When the Dreadnought moves toward a particular section of rubble, orc mobs position themselves to intercept. The ambush is not subtle. Orcs are incapable of stealth in large groups, but it does create moments where the Dreadnought must fight through denser concentrations of enemies. The Dreadnought pilot, recognizing this pattern, begins varying their movement irregularly. They might move left twice, establishing a pattern, then suddenly move right, catching orcs out of position. Or they might feint movement in one direction, drawing orc mobs to reposition, then reverse course and strike the thin sections they left behind. Another critical adaptation involves the Dreadnought's use of its remaining functional systems. As the assault cannon and heavy flamer are expended, the power fist becomes the sole weapon. But the power fist, while devastating, can only engage one target at a time. Against a horde, this is insufficient. The pilot begins using the Dreadnought's mass itself as a weapon. A charging orc mob finds the Dreadnought suddenly stomping toward them, each footfall crushing multiple orcs under tons of armored walker. The Dreadnought's shoulder, swung like a battering ram, can clear a path through packed groups. Even the dysfunctional left arm, frozen in position and unable to fire its empty assault cannon, can be used to sweep orcs aside. The sheer mass of the armored limb sufficient to break bones and send greenskins flying. This use of the Dreadnought as a physical bludgeon, rather than just a weapons platform, requires a fundamental shift in how the pilot perceives combat. They must think less like a tank commander directing fire and more like a melee fighter using their entire body. The neural interface makes this possible. The pilot perceives the Dreadnought as their body, making such adaptation intuitive despite the vast difference in scale between a human form and a walking tank. The orcs, observing this adaptation, begin their own counter-evolution. Instead of attempting to engage the Dreadnought directly when it is stomping toward them, they scatter and regroup, flowing around the walker like water and attacking from behind once it has passed. This forces the Dreadnought to constantly rotate, trying to keep the most dangerous orc concentrations in front where the power fist can engage them. Leadership dynamics within the orc horde also evolve throughout the battle. The initial warboss who led the charge, if he still lives, likely remains in nominal command. But battlefield authority shifts to whoever is most successful in damaging the Dreadnought. A nob who manages to land a significant blow gains status, and other orcs instinctively follow his example. This creates a kind of distributed tactical innovation, where successful techniques propagate through the horde organically. When a nob discovers that attacking the Dreadnought's damaged right leg joint from a specific angle causes the walker to temporarily lose balance. Other orcs observe and begin replicating the tactic. The Dreadnought pilot must then adapt to this new threat, adjusting their stance to protect the vulnerable joint or compensating for the instability with counterbalancing movements. The presence of specialist orcs further complicates the tactical picture. Tankbusters, if any remain, represent a serious threat even when their rockets are expended. These orcs understand vehicles and machines instinctively. They can identify weak points in the Dreadnought's armor that ordinary boys would miss. A tankbuster might notice that a particular armor plate has cracked and direct attacks there, attempting to widen the breach. Mech boys similarly understand the Dreadnought's construction better than other orcs. They might attempt to disable specific systems by targeting their components rather than just hacking randomly. A mech boy could recognize that a particular cable cluster carries power to the Dreadnought's left arm and attempt to sever it, consciously trying to cripple the walker's functionality rather than just inflicting damage. The Dreadnought pilot, aware of these specialist threats through experience and tactical analysis, must prioritize eliminating them even when other targets seem more immediately dangerous. A mob of 30 chopper boys is frightening, but they are just orcs with crude weapons. A single tankbuster or mech boy who understands the Dreadnought's vulnerabilities can cause disproportionate damage. The power fist must sometimes reach past easier targets to crush these specialists before they can exploit their knowledge. Environmental factors also play increasing roles as the battle develops. The Dreadnought's heat buildup, mentioned earlier, becomes more problematic as hours pass. Orc blood and gore clogging cooling vents not only reduces heat dissipation, but creates additional problems. The organic material begins to cook on the hot metal surfaces, creating smoke that obscures vision and emits acrid smells that can interfere even with mechanical sensors. The pilot must occasionally shake the Dreadnought violently or use sweeping movements to clear this debris, accepting the tactical risk of being distracted during these moments. Orcs who observe this learn to wait for these clearing maneuvers and attack during them, when the Dreadnought's attention is divided. The corpse piles create increasingly complex terrain as the battle progresses. What began as flat ground becomes a landscape of bodies, some piled 3 or 4 orcs deep. This terrain benefits neither side equally. The Dreadnought's footing becomes treacherous, the walker liable to step on a corpse and have it collapse underfoot, causing momentary instability. But the orcs must climb these same piles to reach the walker, slowing their approach and making them vulnerable during the climb. Both sides adapt to this corpse terrain. The Dreadnought begins using the body piles as barriers, positioning itself so that orcs must funnel through gaps between piles, limiting the number that can attack simultaneously. The orcs counter by spreading out more, accepting that their advance will be slower in exchange for attacking from more directions. Weather can introduce additional variables. If rain begins falling during the battle, the blood-slicked ground becomes even more treacherous. The Dreadnought's sensors might have difficulty with rain obscuring optical inputs. But rain also creates puddles of diluted orc blood that can short out exposed electrical systems, potentially harming both the Dreadnought and any orc weapons with electrical components. Dust and smoke from destroyed vehicles and structures creates visibility problems. The Dreadnought's sensor suit includes thermal imaging and other non-optical detection methods, giving it an advantage in poor visibility. But if the sensors themselves are damaged or covered in debris, these advantages diminish. The pilot must sometimes rely on extrapolation and prediction, striking at where they believe orcs are rather than where they can confirm them to be. The psychological adaptation on both sides is perhaps the most significant evolution. The Dreadnought pilot, as the battle stretches from minutes into hours, must manage cognitive fatigue. The neural interface reduces the mental strain compared to conventional vehicle operation, but it does not eliminate it entirely. Maintaining perfect focus for hours while surrounded by thousands of enemies requires mental discipline that only centuries of experience can provide. The pilot learns to enter a kind of meditative state, a flow condition where conscious thought recedes and instinct takes over. Each orc becomes not an individual enemy, but a component in a larger pattern. The battle becomes less about discrete engagements and more about rhythm, about timing, about moving through a dance of violence that has its own terrible logic. The orcs, meanwhile, experience their own psychological evolution. The initial excitement of battle remains, but it is joined by something else: respect. Orcs respect strength, and the Dreadnought is demonstrating strength beyond anything most of these orcs have encountered. A walker that has killed over 1,000 of their fellows and still fights, still crushes orcs with every blow of its power fist, is worthy of respect in the orc worldview. This respect manifests as increased determination rather than fear. Orcs do not flee from worthy opponents, they fight harder against them. The glory of being the one to bring down such a foe drives them to take risks, to make attacks they would normally avoid. This actually makes them more dangerous in some ways, as desperate orcs attempt tactics like climbing directly onto the Dreadnought's body and attempting to pry open access panels, accepting near certain death for the chance to cause critical damage. The Gestalt field reaches a kind of peak during these prolonged engagements. With so many orcs in one place, all focused on a single objective, all experiencing the joy of battle, the psychic energy becomes almost palpable. The Dreadnought pilot, through their sensors, can sometimes detect strange readings that might correlate with this field, electromagnetic anomalies or minor reality distortions that have no obvious source. This intensity of the Gestalt field can cause strange effects. Orc weapons that should have stopped functioning continue to work. Orc boys that should be dead from blood loss keep fighting. The orcs seem to move slightly faster than they should, hit slightly harder, as if the collective belief of the horde makes them more dangerous than any individual orc has right to be. The Dreadnought cannot counter this directly, but awareness of it allows for adaptation. The pilot cannot assume orcs will behave according to normal physical limitations. Tactics that rely on enemies bleeding out or succumbing to wounds become less effective. Instead, the pilot must ensure each killed orc is so thoroughly destroyed that no amount of Gestalt energy will allow them to continue fighting. This requirement for thorough elimination slows the Dreadnought's kill rate. Where earlier in the battle a glancing blow from the power fist might have been enough to disable an orc, now the pilot ensures each strike is fatal, and obviously so. The power fist must completely pulverize targets, not merely wound them. This thoroughness costs time and energy, but prevents the nightmare scenario of dead orcs rising to attack again. As both sides continue to evolve and adapt, the battle enters its final phase. The orcs, though fewer now, are fighting with maximum intensity. The Dreadnought, though damaged and degraded, has learned the patterns of this particular horde and adapted to exploit their tendencies. What happens in this final phase will determine whether the ancient warrior survives or whether this is truly their last stand. Critical moments. Every battle has inflection points. Moments when the entire engagement balances on the edge between success and catastrophe. In a battle between a Dreadnought and an orc horde, these moments often come when least expected, triggered by equipment failure, enemy innovation, or simple accumulated damage reaching critical thresholds. It is in these moments that the true character of both the warrior within the Dreadnought and the green tide surrounding them is revealed. 4 hours into the engagement, with over 1,600 orcs dead and perhaps 200 still actively engaged, the Dreadnought faces its first genuinely critical moment. The power plant, stressed beyond all rated parameters, begins to fail. Not catastrophically, there is no explosion or complete shutdown. Instead, power output starts fluctuating wildly. For 5 seconds, full power flows to all systems. Then it drops to 50%. Then it spikes to 120%, over the safety threshold. Then it crashes to 30%. These fluctuations wreak havoc with the Dreadnought systems. The power fist, mid-swing at an orc knob, suddenly loses power. The fist continues forward on momentum alone, the disruption field flickering and dying. The impact still crushes the knob, the sheer mass is sufficient. But without the disruption field, the damage is less complete. The knob's body is broken rather than obliterated, and several orcs see this, understand it, and immediately begin shouting to their fellows that the Dreadnought is weakening. The Gestalt field responds to this information almost instantly. The orcs surge forward with renewed enthusiasm. Sensing victory, a massive orc, easily large enough to be a warboss himself, barrels through the ranks of lesser orcs and charges the Dreadnought. He wields a massive chopper, a blade forged from what appears to be a piece of ship hull plating, and he swings it with enough force to crack ceramite. The blow lands on the Dreadnought's already damaged right leg joint. The chopper penetrates the cracked armor, cutting deep into the hydraulic systems beneath. Fluid sprays out, pressurized hydraulic fluid that keeps the leg functional. The leg begins to buckle, the Dreadnought tilting to the right as its support fails. This is the moment. If the Dreadnought falls, the orcs will swarm over it, hacking at every vulnerable point until they find the sarcophagus. The pilot, through the neural interface, feels the leg failing as if it were their own flesh giving way. Every instinct screams to catch the fall, to brace somehow. But the Dreadnought has no free limbs. The left arm is frozen. The right arm has the power fist, but using it to catch the fall means exposing the entire torso to attack. The pilot makes a decision that defies every survival instinct. They accelerate the fall. Instead of fighting to stay upright, the pilot causes the Dreadnought to throw its weight to the right, turning the uncontrolled collapse into a controlled charge. The massive bulk of the walker crashes into the group of orcs, clustered around the warboss who damaged the leg. The impact crushes a dozen orcs instantly, including the warboss himself. His triumphant roar cut off as several tons of Dreadnought land on him. But now the Dreadnought is down, lying on its right side. The pilot has perhaps 3 seconds before the orcs realize what has happened and swarm the fallen walker. Those 3 seconds must be used perfectly. The power fist, now directly parallel to the ground rather than operating vertically, sweeps in a wide arc. The motion is horizontal rather than the usual up and down, and it catches the orcs completely by surprise. 15 orcs, rushing to pile onto what they think is a defeated enemy, are swept aside, their bodies broken by the fist's passage. The Dreadnought's left leg, its only fully functional limb, pistons down against the ground, the force of the extension lifting the entire walker. For a moment, the Dreadnought balances on the left leg alone, a precarious equilibrium that cannot last. But it does not need to last. The pilot uses the momentum from the leg's push to roll the walker, the motion rotating the Dreadnought around its horizontal axis. The roll crushes more orcs, the armored bulk simply grinding them into the blood-soaked earth. The rotation brings the Dreadnought back toward upright, though not quite vertical. The walker settles into a tilted stance, leaning heavily to the left to compensate for the completely failed right leg. It is not stable. It will not hold long. But it is upright enough to fight. The power plant chooses this moment to stabilize. Whether the stress of the fall caused something to reseat properly, or whether the tech, priest's prayers were finally answered, power flow becomes steady again. The power fist's disruption field flares to full strength, and the next orc to approach is obliterated with satisfying completeness. But the Dreadnought is now crippled in ways that will not self-repair. The right leg is completely non-functional, hanging uselessly from the hip joint. The walker must balance on the left leg alone, using the ground and debris for additional support. Mobility is reduced to almost zero. The Dreadnought can pivot in place, rotating around its center of mass, but it cannot move to new positions effectively. The orcs see this and adapt their tactics immediately. Instead of charging directly at the power fist, they begin to spread out, circling the immobilized walker. Those behind the Dreadnought, where the power fist cannot easily reach, press their attack with renewed aggression. The pilot faces a terrible dilemma. Turning to address threats behind means exposing the back to the orcs in front. But ignoring the rear threats means allowing orcs to hack at the Dreadnought's back armor unopposed. The solution, such as it is, involves constant rotation. The Dreadnought spins slowly in place, the power fist sweeping in circles, forcing all orcs to remain at a certain distance or be crushed. This creates a temporary stalemate. The orcs cannot easily close with the spinning Dreadnought. But the Dreadnought cannot kill orcs as efficiently while dedicating so much effort to defensive rotation. The kill rate, which had been averaging 30 orcs per minute earlier in the battle, drops to perhaps 15. At this rate, eliminating the remaining orcs will take another 15 minutes. 15 minutes of continuous operation with no guarantee that additional systems won't fail. The second critical moment arrives at the 4-hour and 40-minute mark. An orc painboy, one of the few specialists who survived the battle thus far, approaches the Dreadnought from an unexpected angle. The painboy is not a frontline fighter. He has been hanging back, treating wounded orcs and occasionally sewing limbs back onto boys who lost them. But now he sees an opportunity. The painboy carries a large saw, normally used for crude surgery on orc patients. He darts forward during a moment when the power fist is engaged elsewhere, and he applies the saw to an exposed cable bundle on the Dreadnought's lower torso. The cables carry data and power to various systems. The saw tears into them with brutal efficiency. Multiple systems fail simultaneously. The Dreadnought's communication systems go offline. Not that there was anyone to communicate with. Worse, several sensor feeds die, plunging portions of the pilot's awareness into darkness. The neural interface, suddenly receiving error signals from multiple sources, glitches severely. For nearly 10 seconds, the pilot is disconnected, their consciousness floating in the amniotic fluid of the sarcophagus, blind and helpless. In those 10 seconds, the orcs surge forward. Without the power fist swinging to keep them back, they close rapidly. By the time the neural interface re-establishes connection, there are orcs climbing on the Dreadnought's back, hacking at armor plates and attempting to pry open access panels. The pilot, awareness suddenly returning, experiences a moment of pure disorientation. They cannot see the orcs on their back. Those sensors are among the ones that failed. They must infer their presence from the vibrations transmitted through the armor, from the sound of metal being struck, from indirect evidence rather than direct observation. The power fist cannot reach the Dreadnought's back. But the pilot has one option left: the Dreadnought's weight. The walker deliberately falls backward, the pilot intentionally giving up the precarious upright balance they have maintained. The Dreadnought crashes down, its back slamming into the ground with tremendous force. The orcs who were climbing on the back are caught between multiple tons of armored walker and the unyielding earth. They are crushed, their bodies pulverized by the impact. But now the Dreadnought is on its back, like a beetle flipped over, its armored belly exposed to the sky. The power fist sweeps back and forth, keeping orcs at bay. But the pilot knows this position is untenable. They have perhaps 30 seconds before the orcs realize they can attack the belly armor, which is thinner than the dorsal plating. The left leg, still functional, becomes the primary tool. The pilot extends it fully, then retracts it, the piston motion generating force. They do this repeatedly, each extension and retraction rocking the Dreadnought. On the third rock, they use the momentum to roll, the walker rotating onto its left side. From the side position, the power fist can reach the ground. The pilot uses it to push, the enormous strength of the fist, arm forcing the Dreadnought upward. The walker rises, first to a kneeling position on the left leg, then to a precarious upright stance again. But the exertion has cost more damage. The stress fractures in the right leg's armor have widened. Coolant is leaking from a compromised heat exchanger. The power plant's output is declining again, not from malfunction but from simple depletion of fuel. The Dreadnought has been operating at combat power levels for nearly 5 hours, far beyond any planned deployment duration. The third critical moment is psychological rather than mechanical. At 5 hours and 10 minutes, with approximately 50 orcs remaining and all systems degraded to minimal functionality, the pilot faces a fundamental question: is survival still possible? A rational analysis of the situation suggests no. The Dreadnought has lost most of its mobility, much of its sensory capacity, and is operating on diminishing power. The orcs, though few in number now, include some of the toughest specimens, the ones who survived 5 hours of continuous battle. They are not weakening, if anything. The Gestalt field makes them stronger as their numbers thin and their focus intensifies. The pilot could simply shut down, accepting destruction with the knowledge that they fought well and killed many enemies. The organic brain would be protected in the sarcophagus until power completely fails, perhaps hours from now. There might even be time for a rescue, if Imperial forces arrive in time. But continuing to fight risks catastrophic damage to the sarcophagus itself, potentially killing the pilot permanently, rather than leaving them in a state where recovery is possible. This is the moment where the warrior within must decide what kind of ending they want. A dignified shutdown, preservation attempted, or a fight to the absolute end, accepting permanent death but ensuring maximum enemy casualties. The decision, when it comes, is not really a decision at all. The pilot is a space marine, entombed for centuries but still bound by the same oaths they swore when they first donned power armor. They swore to never surrender, to never accept defeat while strength remains, and strength, however diminished, remains. The power fist rises and falls. An orc knob, approaching what he believes is a dying opponent, finds himself instead crushed to pulp. The message is clear: the Dreadnought may be damaged, crippled, operating on failing systems, but it is not defeated. It will fight until the power plant goes dark, or until every orc lies dead. There is no third option. The orcs, to their credit, understand and respect this. These final orcs are not the enthusiastic youngsters who charged into battle hours ago. They are survivors, veterans of a 5-hour meat grinder who have seen thousands of their fellows killed. They know they are likely going to die, but they also know they are fighting a legend now, a warrior who refused to quit even when refusal meant certain death. The final phase of the battle begins. Not a race against time, but a contest of wills. The Dreadnought against the last of the orcs, both sides exhausted, both damaged, both determined to be the one left standing when the sun finally sets on this bloody field. The cost of victory, when the last orc falls. Crushed beneath the power fist that has already killed more than 1,700 of them, the silence is profound. Not complete silence, the battlefield is never truly quiet. Fires crackle in destroyed vehicles. Wind whistles through shattered structures. Distant sounds of fighting from other parts of the war zone carry on the air. But compared to the roar of 5 hours of continuous combat, the relative quiet is overwhelming. The Dreadnought stands, or rather leans heavily to one side, motionless for the first time since the engagement began. The power fist, dripping with orc gore, hangs at a neutral position. The walker's optical sensors scan the field, searching for any movement that might indicate surviving orcs. There are hundreds of corpses, thousands. They carpet the ground in every direction, piled in heaps, scattered across the ruined street, draped over debris. Green blood has pooled in every depression, creating small lakes of vital fluid that will spawn new orc infestations in the months to come unless the Imperium burns this entire area to ash. But all the visible orcs are dead. The last one, the knob who charged the Dreadnought in what he surely knew was a final attack, lies in pieces around the walker's feet. The battle is over. Victory, such as it is, belongs to the Imperium. The cost of this victory is immediately apparent when assessed objectively. The Dreadnought is catastrophically damaged. The right leg is completely destroyed, torn apart by hundreds of impacts until only mangled metal remains. The left leg, while still functional, has sustained stress damage that makes its continued operation unlikely for more than a few additional hours. The hip joints, never designed to support the entire walker's weight on one leg for extended periods, are compromised. The left arm, frozen in position since early in the battle, has sustained additional damage during the various falls and impacts. The assault cannon it mounts is scrap, the barrel bent, the feed mechanism shattered. Even if ammunition were available, the weapon could not fire. The shoulder joint that connects the arm to the torso has microfractures throughout the mounting assembly. The power fist, remarkably, remains mostly functional. The disruption field generator still operates, though at reduced capacity. The hydraulics that provide the crushing strength are intact, though leaking from a dozen small breaches. This weapon, which killed more orcs than all the Dreadnought's other systems combined, survived the battle in better condition than any other component. The torso armor is compromised at multiple points. What was once continuous ceramite plating is now a patchwork of intact sections and breaches. Several armor plates have been torn completely free, exposing the adamantium framework beneath. Other plates have cracked, remaining in place but no longer providing effective protection. The vents that cool the power plant are so clogged with orc blood and debris that they are essentially non-functional. The sensor systems are in even worse condition. Of the dozen external sensor arrays the Dreadnought deployed with, only 3 remain operational. Large portions of the pilot's visual field are simply black, dead zones where sensors no longer transmit data. The targeting computer has suffered cascade failures, its processing power reduced to perhaps 40% of baseline. The communication systems are offline entirely, the cables cut by the Painboy's saw. Most critically, the power plant is failing. Fuel reserves are nearly exhausted. The reactor, designed for perhaps 6 hours of peak operation before refueling is required, has been running at maximum output for over 5 hours. Critical components are showing heat stress damage. Neutron flux in the core is declining as fuel is consumed. Within an hour, perhaps 2 if the reactor is shut down to minimal operation, power will fail completely. The pilot, through the degraded neural interface, feels all of this as a kind of comprehensive exhaustion. It is not the fatigue of muscles worked too hard or lungs pushed beyond capacity. The organic body has no muscles or lungs anymore. It is instead the awareness of systems shutting down, of capabilities fading. Of the machine, body that has been their form for centuries slowly dying around them. But the pilot is also aware of what was accomplished. 1,700 dead orcs is not merely an impressive kill count. It represents the destruction of approximately 5% of an orc force large enough to threaten an entire Imperial defensive position. The 200 Imperial Guard soldiers who sheltered behind the Dreadnought's position, who were given 5 hours to rest, resupply, and fortify their position, now have a chance to hold when the next orc wave arrives. Children in the Hive city who would have died if the orcs broke through this position will instead live to see adulthood, Strategic victory, in war, is often measured in such stark terms. Acceptable loss calculations. The Dreadnought is likely beyond repair. Recovering and restoring it would require resources better spent on other priorities. The pilot will either die when power fails, or be extracted and entombed in a new chassis if recovery forces arrive in time. But this loss, the permanent end of one Dreadnought and possibly its pilot, enabled the survival of 200 soldiers and an unknown number of civilians. By the cold mathematics of military necessity, this is a favorable trade. The pilot does not think in these terms. Space Marines, even ones entombed for centuries, do not calculate their worth versus civilians saved. They fight because duty requires it, because the Emperor demands it, because any alternative is unthinkable. But they are also pragmatic warriors who understand that sacrifice must serve purpose. A glorious last stand that accomplishes nothing is merely waste. A last stand that preserves something worth preserving is victory, regardless of personal cost. As the walker stands among the corpses of its enemies, systems gradually shutting down to conserve remaining power, the pilot allows themselves a moment of something approaching satisfaction. Not pride. Space Marines are trained to suppress pride as a dangerous emotion that leads to the corruption of chaos. But satisfaction, yes. The job was done. The enemy was stopped. The Imperium endures, at least in this small corner of a galaxy spanning war. The neural interface, beginning to fail as power drops, causes increasing disconnection between pilot and machine. The pilot experiences longer periods of awareness as their organic self, floating in the amniotic fluid, the sounds of the battlefield distant and muffled. Each reconnection brings more notice of how damaged the Dreadnought has become, how little functional capability remains. If recovery forces are coming, they need to arrive soon. The power plant will not sustain life support for more than 90 minutes with the reactor winding down. After that, the organic body will begin to die as the amniotic fluid loses its oxygenation and temperature regulation. The pilot has perhaps 2 hours before death becomes inevitable. But the pilot has been in these situations before. Battles where survival seemed impossible, where extraction was uncertain, where the only certainty was that duty had been fulfilled regardless of personal survival. They settle into the weight with the patience of someone who has already lived longer than any warrior has right to expect. The sun, which rose at the battle's beginning and traversed the sky during the hours of combat, now approaches the horizon. The battlefield is bathed in the orange, red light of sunset, the orc blood on the ground reflecting the light in ways that make the entire scene appear painted in shades of violence. The Dreadnought casts a long shadow across the field of corpses, a monument to duty fulfilled and oaths kept. An hour passes, then another. The power plant continues its decline, output dropping steadily. The Dreadnought's internal systems begin automated shutdown sequences, prioritizing life support over all other functions. Weapons go offline. Mobility, such as it was, ceases. The pilot's connection to the machine becomes increasingly tenuous, the neural interface preserving bandwidth only for critical systems. As the second hour of waiting approaches its end, new sounds reach the Dreadnought's few remaining external audio sensors engines. Vehicle engines, and they sound imperial. The distinctive whine of Rhino APCs, the heavier rumble of Lim and Russ battle tanks, voices shouting orders in Gothic, the language of the Imperium. The recovery force has arrived. Tech Marines are the first to reach the Dreadnought, their armor painted in the colors of the chapter, their servo arms extending to begin preliminary assessment of the damage. They work with practiced efficiency, connecting portable power supplies to keep life support functioning, establishing communication links to reach the pilot within. The conversation, when it comes, is brief. The pilot's voice, transmitted through a functional Vox speaker on the Dreadnought's chest, sounds mechanical but determined. The enemy is eliminated. The position holds. This unit is combat ineffective, but life support remains stable. Awaiting transport to Chapter Fortress for assessment and potential restoration. The Tech Marine who leads the recovery team, a veteran who has seen many Dreadnoughts in various states of damage, makes his own assessment. The walker is salvageable, barely. The sarcophagus appears intact, which is the critical factor. Everything else can be rebuilt. It will be a long process, months of work by the Tech Marines and their assistants. But the ancient warrior within can be preserved, can be given a new body to continue their service. Ancient One, the Tech Marine says, using the honorific due to Dreadnought pilots, you have won a great victory this day. The enemy is scattered. The position holds. You will be restored to fight again when the chapter has need of you. The pilot's response is a simple acknowledgement, conserving power and words for the essential. But through the neural interface, in those final moments before shutdown is initiated for transport, the pilot allows themselves a moment of reflection. They have fought for centuries, died and been reborn in metal, served the Emperor through millennia and battles beyond counting. They will likely fight for centuries more, awakened when needed, sleeping between wars in the endless cycle that defines their existence. But this battle, this stand against impossible odds, this victory measured in thousands of orc dead and positions held, will be remembered. It will be recorded in the chapter's histories, taught to new initiates as an example of what determination and skill can accomplish. The Dreadnought will be restored, perhaps upgraded with new systems salvaged from other damaged walkers. And when next the chapter has need, when next an enemy threatens the Imperium, the ancient warrior will wake once more to do their duty. For now, as the recovery team begins the delicate process of transporting the damaged walker, as the sun sets fully and darkness claims the battlefield, the pilot settles into the final shutdown sequence. The neural interface disconnects gracefully, consciousness fading not into death, but into the familiar darkness of stasis, sleep. The last thought transmitted through failing systems is a prayer of thanks to the Emperor for another day served, another victory won. The battlefield, littered with thousands of orc corpses and dominated by the battered form of the Dreadnought being carefully loaded onto a transport, stands as testament to what a single warrior can accomplish when duty and determination exceed any rational consideration of odds or survival. The Imperium endures because warriors like this, entombed in metal and sustained by will alone, refuse to accept defeat no matter the cost. Historical echoes throughout the Imperium's 10,000 years of war, countless such battles have been fought. The engagement we have examined in detail is neither unique nor especially noteworthy by the standards of space marine history, but it serves as a representative example of a pattern that has repeated across thousands of worlds, in battles recorded and unrecorded, throughout the long twilight of humanity's declining empire. The archives of the Adeptus Astartes, maintained by chapter librarians with obsessive precision, contain records of dreadnoughts facing orc hordes, dating back to the Great Crusade itself. During the Wars of the Emperor, when humanity first reached out to reclaim the galaxy, dreadnoughts were often deployed as shock units to break particularly stubborn orc resistance. The ancient patterns, Contemptor and Leviathan models, regularly faced orc armies that numbered in the tens of thousands. One account from the reconquest of the Eleanor sector describes a single Leviathan pattern dreadnought holding a breach in the walls of an orc fortress city for 18 hours. The Dreadnought, identified in records only as Brother Ancient Corvin of the Lunar Wolves, killed an estimated 3,000 orcs before the breach was relieved by a tactical squad. The Dreadnought required complete reconstruction afterward, with only the sarcophagus and one arm salvageable, but the breach held. The city fell 3 days later, and the campaign proceeded to victory. The Battle of Iron, fought in 789, M41 on the Blood Angels' homeworld of Baal, provides perhaps the most dramatic example of dreadnought deployment against orcs. The Warbus Big Scorcher led an orc invasion force of unprecedented size against the Blood Angels. The chapter deployed every available resource, including all 41 of their dreadnoughts. The ancient warriors, some dating back to the Horus heresy itself, were led by venerable Dreadnought Astromel. The dreadnoughts formed the center of the Blood Angels' defensive line, anchoring positions that allowed less heavily armored forces to operate. Records indicate the combined dreadnought force eliminated approximately 40,000 orcs over the course of a 3-day battle. The cost was severe. 11 dreadnoughts were destroyed. Their pilots finally granted the peace of true death, but the line held. Baal was saved. The chapter survived to fight on during the Third War for Armageddon, a conflict that drew orc forces numbering in the millions. Individual dreadnought actions became almost routine. The Ultramarines deployed 14 dreadnoughts to support Imperial Guard forces holding Hive Tartarus. Each dreadnought was assigned a section of defensive line, approximately 500 meters wide. They were expected to hold those sections against whatever the orcs could throw at them. Venerable Brother Barcus, piloting a standard Castroferran pattern dreadnought, held his section for 11 days of continuous orc assaults. His ammunition exhausted on the 3rd day. He fought the remaining 8 days purely with his power fist and the dreadnought's mass as weapons. When relief finally arrived, Tech priests found his walker standing alone in a field of orc corpses estimated at over 4,000. The Dreadnought was too damaged to salvage, its reactor having burned out completely, but Barcus survived, his sarcophagus intact, and was later installed in a new chassis to continue his service. The Space Wolves have their own traditions regarding dreadnoughts facing orc hoarders. The chapter's saga tellers record the deeds of Dreadnought Thengar, who during the defense of the Fang held the Valgard Gate against an orc army for 3 days and nights. The sagas describe him killing orcs by the hundreds and thousands, though exact numbers are likely exaggerated in the telling. What is confirmed is that Thengar fought alone at the gate after the gate's other defenders fell to orc bombardment. He held until reinforcements arrived, his dreadnought so covered in orc blood that his chapter's colors were completely obscured. These are the recorded battles, the ones important enough or dramatic enough to be preserved in chapter archives. For every one of these, there are dozens or hundreds that go unrecorded. A dreadnought deployed to hold a nameless crossroads on a forgotten world. A last stand in a ruined city whose name is lost to time. Victories won at costs so high they are quietly forgotten. Defeats where the dreadnought fell but bought time for others to escape. The pattern across all these engagements remains remarkably consistent. A single dreadnought, or a small number of them, deployed against orc forces that vastly outnumber them. The initial phase where ranged weapons eliminate hundreds of orcs at distance. The grinding melee phase where the dreadnought uses its close combat weapons to continue the slaughter despite being surrounded. The accumulation of damage as orc weapons eventually find gaps in armor or weak points in systems. And finally, either relief arrives and the dreadnought survives for repair, or it fights until destroyed, its last act typically crushing one final enemy even as power fails. There are lessons in these battles, tactical wisdom accumulated over 10 millennia of warfare. Tech Marines study them to understand how to better configure dreadnoughts for anti-infantry work. Tactical commanders learn how to position dreadnoughts to maximize their defensive potential. Chapter masters understand when to wake their ancient warriors and when to preserve them for more critical engagements. One lesson stands out across all accounts. A dreadnought is force multiplier not merely through its firepower, but through its psychological impact on both allies and enemies. Imperial forces fighting alongside a dreadnought fight harder, inspired by the presence of an ancient hero. Orcs, seeing a dreadnought, often concentrate their attacks on it, drawing pressure away from more fragile units. The dreadnought becomes the center of gravity around which the entire battle rotates. This gravitational effect is why dreadnoughts are so often deployed in exactly the situations we have examined, defending critical positions against overwhelming numbers. The dreadnought attracts enemy attention, withstands that attention longer than any other unit could, and buys time for reinforcements to arrive or for evacuations to complete. It is a grim calculation, one that treats the dreadnought as an expendable asset, despite the irreplaceable warrior within. But in the brutal logic of warfare, it is often the correct calculation. The orcs, for their part, have developed their own responses to dreadnoughts over the millennia. Some warbosses field deft dreads as direct counters, walker dueling walker and brutal close combat. Others concentrate their heavy weapons fire, using tank busters and looters to overwhelm the dreadnought's armor through sheer volume of fire. The most cunning warbosses attempt to bypass dreadnoughts entirely, flowing around them to attack less heavily defended positions. But orcs being orcs, most simply charge directly at the dreadnought, eager for the fight. This tendency has not changed in 10,000 years. Orc biology and psychology make them incapable of avoiding a tough fight even when tactical sense would suggest doing so. This consistency makes them predictable enemies in some ways, though their raw effectiveness in close combat means predictability does not equal weakness. The ultimate question that emerges from examining these historical battles is whether the deployment of dreadnoughts against orc hordes represents sound tactics or desperate necessity. The answer appears to be both. In an ideal scenario, dreadnoughts would be used as strike weapons, deployed at critical moments to break enemy formations or eliminate high-value targets, then withdrawn to safety. But the Imperium rarely faces ideal scenarios. More often, resources are stretched thin, forces are outnumbered, and desperate measures become necessary. Deploying a dreadnought to hold a position against impossible odds is desperate. It risks the permanent loss of an irreplaceable asset. But when the alternative is losing that position and everything it protects, desperation becomes reasonable strategy. The Imperium survives by making such calculations constantly, weighing acceptable losses against unacceptable defeats, trading individual warriors for broader strategic gains. The Dreadnoughts themselves rarely question these deployments. They wake when called, fight where directed, and ask only that their service means something. Whether they face 10 orcs or 10,000, whether they survive or fall, their purpose remains the same: to serve the Emperor and protect humanity from the Xenos threats that seek to destroy it. This purpose, more than armor or weapons, is what makes Dreadnoughts effective against orc hoarders. The orcs fight for the joy of battle, for the thrill of violence, for the glory of proving themselves the biggest and strongest. The Dreadnought fights because duty demands it, because oaths were sworn that transcend life and death, because service to the Imperium is the highest calling a warrior can answer. When these two philosophies of war collide, when orc enthusiasm meets space marine determination, the result is the kind of battle we have examined. Thousands dead, a battlefield transformed into a charnel house, and at the center, a single battered warrior standing amid the carnage, having fulfilled their duty regardless of cost. The endless war. To truly understand what happens when a Dreadnought faces an orc army, we must step back from the tactical details and examine the broader context. These battles do not occur in isolation. They are part of an endless war that has consumed the galaxy for millennia, a conflict without foreseeable end or final victory. The orcs are everywhere. They are perhaps the most successful species in the galaxy by any objective measure. They reproduce through spores, require minimal resources, thrive in any environment, and multiply exponentially when left unchecked. Every world the orcs have ever touched carries their genetic legacy, spores lurking in the soil waiting to spawn new generations. Even total defeats, where every orc is killed, simply mean new orcs will emerge in the coming years from the spores the dead released. This makes the orc threat fundamentally different from other enemies the Imperium faces. Chaos can be driven back, its cults suppressed, its champions killed. Tyranids can be defeated, their hive fleets destroyed or forced to flee. Even the Necrons, ancient and terrible as they are finite in number and can be contained. But the orcs are self-sustaining, self-propagating, and ultimately ineradicable short of destroying every world they have ever touched. The Imperium's response to this endless threat is equally endless vigilance. Entire military organizations exist solely to combat orcs. Entire Forge worlds produce ammunition and weapons primarily for anti-orc operations. Countless Imperial Guard regiments spend their entire service fighting greenskins, generation after generation of soldiers bleeding and dying to hold back the green tide. Space Marine chapters, the Imperium's elite forces, find a significant portion of their operations devoted to orc suppression. It is not glorious work. It does not involve dramatic battles against ancient evils or crusades to reclaim lost territories. It is simply grinding, endless warfare against an enemy that will never fully go away. For every orc army destroyed, 2 more will emerge somewhere else. For every world cleansed, 3 more will report orc infestations. Into this context we place the Dreadnought. These ancient warriors, some dating back 10,000 years, have likely fought orcs dozens or even hundreds of times over their extended service. They have seen the same pattern repeat endlessly: the gathering horde, the great campaign, the climactic battle, the aftermath where spores ensure the cycle will begin again. This repetition could be soul-destroying. Fighting the same enemy again and again, achieving the same temporary victories, watching the problem recur despite all efforts. For mortal soldiers, this hopelessness drives many to despair or corruption. But Dreadnoughts, by their nature, are suited to this kind of eternal warfare in ways that living soldiers are not. The stasis, sleep between deployments, means Dreadnoughts do not experience the full weight of futility. They wake, fight, and sleep again. The years or decades between deployments are simply darkness, time that passes without experience. Each awakening is fresh, each battle engaged with renewed purpose. Because the pilot has not lived through the grinding years of preparation and deployment that exhaust mortal soldiers. This makes Dreadnoughts ideal for the kind of warfare the Imperium must wage against orcs: indefinite, attritional, requiring occasional deployment of maximum force followed by long periods of quiescence. A Dreadnought can wake, destroy an orc army, then sleep for 50 years until the next major incursion requires their attention. A mortal soldier must live through all 50 years, watching for threats, fighting smaller engagements, slowly being worn down by the endlessness of it all. The psychological sustainability of Dreadnought deployment against orcs is therefore better than it might initially appear. Yes, each engagement risks permanent loss. Yes, the battles are brutal and the damage sustained is severe. But the alternative, keeping mortal forces in constant readiness for the same threats, is equally or more costly in the long term. What does individual heroism mean in this context? When the same battle has been fought 1,000 times before and will be fought 1,000 times again. When every victory is temporary and every defeat potentially catastrophic, what value does a single Dreadnought's last stand provide? The answer lies in understanding that warfare at this scale is not about final victories. It is about holding the line. Every Orc army destroyed is one that cannot attack Imperial positions. Every world defended is one where humans can continue to live, work, and serve the Imperium. The goal is not to defeat the Orcs forever. That goal is impossible. The goal is to survive another year, another decade, another century, maintaining the Imperium's existence despite all the forces arrayed against it. In this context, a Dreadnought that destroys an Orc army is not achieving final victory. It is buying time. Time for reinforcements to arrive. Time for defenses to be strengthened. Time for the Imperium to marshal resources for the next engagement. And time, in the endless war, is perhaps the most valuable resource of all. The individual heroism of the Dreadnought pilot, their willingness to stand alone against impossible odds, serves a purpose beyond the immediate tactical gain. It inspires other warriors. Imperial Guard soldiers who witness a Dreadnought's last stand learn that courage is possible, even when defeat seems certain. Space Marines who hear the accounts of ancient brothers, fighting to the end, are reminded of the ideals they swore to uphold. Even civilians, hearing stories of ancient warriors defending their worlds, find reason to maintain faith in the Imperium's protection. This inspirational effect should not be dismissed as mere propaganda. Morale, faith, and the will to continue fighting matter immensely when warfare becomes a condition of existence rather than a temporary state. The Imperium survives not just through superior weapons or tactics, but through the collective will of trillions of humans who choose to fight rather than surrender. Every example of heroism, every story of duty fulfilled against impossible odds, reinforces that will. The Dreadnought's role in this broader picture is therefore both tactical and symbolic. Tactically, they provide heavy firepower and resilience that can turn battles. Symbolically, they represent continuity, the eternal nature of service to the Emperor, the idea that even death is not sufficient excuse to stop fighting. Both aspects are essential to the Imperium's survival. Looking forward, if such a concept has meaning in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, we can predict with confidence that more Dreadnoughts will face more Orc armies. The pattern will repeat. Warriors will be entombed, Orcs will gather in hordes. Battles will be fought with the same terrible violence we have examined. Some Dreadnoughts will survive, others will fall, their pilots finally granted true death after centuries of service. And the war will continue, as it has for 10,000 years, as it likely will for 10,000 more. The Imperium and the Orcs locked in an endless cycle of violence, neither side capable of complete victory, both continuing because continuation is all they know how to do. In this context, asking what happens when a Dreadnought faces an Orc army is really asking what happens when the Imperium's determination meets the Orcs' enthusiasm. What happens when an unstoppable force encounters an immovable object? What happens when warriors who cannot accept defeat fight enemies who cannot conceive of surrender? The answer, repeated across countless battlefields and 10 millennia of history, is exactly what we have examined: violence on a scale that defies comprehension, casualties measured in thousands, destruction so complete that only the dead remain to mark where the battle occurred. And through it all, the Dreadnought stands, fighting because that is what Dreadnoughts do. Fulfilling duty because no alternative is acceptable, serving the Emperor because 10,000 years of service has not yet been enough. This is the nature of war in the 41st millennium. This is what happens when a Dreadnought faces an Orc army. This is the endless grind of survival, the terrible cost of endurance, the price paid daily to ensure the Imperium sees another dawn. If you found this deep dive into Warhammer 40k lore interesting, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There's more to explore in the grim darkness of the far future, and your support helps us continue examining these topics in depth. Thank you for watching, and remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any, And yeah, sleep well.